Have you ever walked into a church and you just felt like nobody cared? You felt like nobody was interested in you? Well, I remember I used to travel. I actually was a bus driver for a sign language group, and we would go to churches, and you would walk in there, and you would feel like, you know what, we don't want you here. You know, one of the things that helped preserve the New Testament church was a thing that we don't really talk a whole lot about. But it's a thing that's vitally important, and it's a thing that's mentioned many times throughout the New Testament, and that's this area of hospitality. You see, during hard times, the thing that really preserves the church is hospitality. Now, we've talked about being sound in judgment. We've talked about having a sober spirit or a watchful spirit in our prayer life. We talked about fervent love. But now Peter here in 1 Peter, the 4th chapter, verse number 9 says, be hospitable to one another without complaint. Hospitality. It is so vital to the survival of the church. We need to be hospitable. Now, what you say, well, what does it mean to be hospitable? To be hospitable is to show someone honor, to show them a place that you are comfortable to come into, and you invite them in. You see, one of the things that we realize is in churches, the first impression is the most lasting impression. If you walk into a church and everybody is so busy doing their thing and nobody's there to greet you, and you're a visitor and you're there for the first time, and no one's there to really welcome you in and to help you, you know what? Chances are you're not going to come back. You didn't even hear the preacher sing. You didn't even hear the worship leader lead in worship. You don't even really know their doctrine or where they stand, but you know what? The thing that will cause a person to come back again is called hospitality. It's welcoming someone. It's welcoming them no matter what they look like, no matter what they smell like. It's welcoming that person in to the meeting. And now Peter is writing to a group of persecuted people. And what's happening is this group of people have become very transient. In other words, they are moving from one city to another city to another city, and they're moving because people are finding out they're believers, and they're moving to preserve their lives, to preserve their ministries. And so Peter is writing to them, and he's giving this very vital information. We need to be hospitable. We need to be welcoming of people who are not people that we don't even know. We need to invite them in. But notice what Peter says. He says that they need to be hospitable to one another without complaint. How many of you realize that during hard times that Peter is writing into, that there's not a total abundance of things? You know, I think that in many of our persecuted countries around the world, people they lack things. But yet Peter is saying, when someone comes into your presence, be hospitable. Share with them the things that you have. And you see, what happens then is there's a union that happens between brothers and sisters in Christ that really cannot be broken or destroyed. In fact, there's a strength that comes in hospitality that we many times don't even realize. That when we open our arms and say, come on in, and we say, we want to fellowship with you, we are part of you, we're behind you, we understand what you're going through, people receive strength from that. And so he says, be hospitable, but don't complain about it. Now, how many of you know you can show hospitality, but it's really not hospitality when you start complaining? Oh, all they want is my food. All they want is my money. Why are they here? And you know what? Those are all complaints. And when you complain about hospitality, you know what? You're not being hospitable. Do you understand? So Peter is writing and he's saying something very vital to these people. He's saying, guys, you need to be hospitable to each other. You need to welcome each other in, even welcoming strangers in. You see, that was a key that caused the early church to survive. And so Peter says, be hospitable to one another. Now, let's go back and review very quickly these 4 things that Peter gives to the church. He says the end is near. He's not talking about the return of Christ. He's talking about the end of his life. He realizes that he's going to lose his life for the sake of the gospel. But what does he say? He says, be of sound judgment. In other words, make sure that your head is on straight. Make sure that you understand the doctrines of the faith. Make sure that you're thinking properly. And then he says that we need to be sober in spirit for the purpose of prayer. What's that mean? He's saying that we need to be watchful. We need to be alert. How many of you know that when you're alert, you can see things coming? You know, one of my favorite people is a man by the name of Dr. J.T. Parrish. And he always said, a prayerful man will never be surprised. You know, we need to be alert in prayer. And then Peter says that we need to be fervent in our love for one another, because love covers a multitude of sins. And then in this verse, he says that we need to be hospitable towards one another. As we go through and as we approach the return of Jesus Christ, and as persecution begins to step up, not only here in the United States, but around the world, these 4 things are essential to our Christian life. And these 4 things are essential to the survival of the Church of Jesus Christ. May God bless you until we speak to you again.